Some thoughts on light. In some sense, to work with film and video is to work with light. As we discussed with the exposure triangle, images are created by light entering the camera through the lens and hitting either celluloid film or a light sensor. By adjusting the camera's settings, you change the way light enters the camera. You can also change this in other ways by going straight to the source, by changing the light itself. First, I'm going to talk a little about some somewhat idealized circumstances. How to approach lighting when you have a video lighting kit at your disposal and are in a location with ample room and full control over the lighting. Then I will show you a few things to think about for a more DIY situation, using things you might have around the house or are not as ambitious to acquire on your own. This class grants you access to a lighting kit at the Media Center called the iCan LED Light Kit FVNMA, which includes 3 LED light panels. We will send you a link to a video that goes over how to use iCan brand LED light panels, but they are fairly user-friendly. The lighting kits from our department, FVNMA, are an upgrade from the General Access lighting kit, which is called iCan LED Light Panel Kit MC, not only because the FVNMA LED light panels are larger, but instead of 2 lights, the FVNMA kit has 3. When it comes to cinematic lighting, 3 is a magic number. One of the go-to lighting setups for filming a subject is what's called 3-point lighting. 3-point lighting is so called because it involves 3 lights: the key light, the fill light, and the hair light, sometimes also called the backlight. You may not need all 3 of these for every shot, and will want to adjust their position to your particular scene. These names don't refer to specific models or physical types of lights, but rather the position that you're using a given light in. So not what the light is, but how you're using it. The key light is your main light, often the brightest light, pointed at your subject, often from just a bit off to one side. If you only have this light, you'll still be able to see your subject, but you'll probably have shadows cast on their face or behind them. Adding in a fill light on the other side can get rid of some of those shadows on the face, filling in the shadows with light from a different angle. In a standard setup, your fill light will be a little less bright than your key light. You can use a light that is less powerful, or if you're using LED light panels with a percentage dial, you can turn it down. But you can also make a light less intense simply by moving the light a little further away from your subject. If you don't have a second light to use as a fill, you can sometimes use a reflector to bounce some of your key light from the other side. When you have a subject lit very evenly with your key light and your fill light, it can look a little flat. The third light, the hair light, helps the subject pop out from their environment and often adds a somewhat cinematic look. The hair light is placed behind and above the subject, pointed at their hair, thus the name. But sometimes people will also refer to this as the backlight. You want this backlight or hair light to be above the frame of the shot. If the light is directly behind your subject, you'll see the light itself, and also your subject will be extremely backlit. The hair light is sometimes the trickiest to figure out in a cramped location and is easiest to manage for a medium or close-up shot rather than wide shots. In addition to your 3-point lighting, you may also want to light your background with an extra pair of lights if you don't want shadows cast behind your subject, or if you're using a green screen and want it to be evenly lit. And you'll want to adjust the exact position of your lights to get the look you want for a particular scene. But imagine this. It's the weekend. The media center is closed. You're at home. And, suddenly, you are struck by an idea for a video. You have some hours free, and this idea is calling out to you like a foghorn through the mist, or like an arrow you must follow to see where it leads. So what are some things to consider with lighting when you are taking a more DIY approach? If you are working during daylight hours, consider using natural light. You may not have the budget for the same lights as a massive cinematic production, but everybody's got the sun. With natural light, be prepared to work quickly and be ready for things to change. A cloud can move across the sun and leave you with an underexposed image, or the sun can move higher in the sky and suddenly everything is blown out from too much light. Filming on overcast days is often the best bet for consistent and even natural lighting. If you're looking for a more dramatic effect from natural lighting, however, you may need to seize a narrow window of opportunity. It's popular to shoot during golden hour, the first hour of light after sunrise, or the last hour of light before sunset, because the angle of the sun gives the light a particular warm quality. Think too about how it may change the look of the scene for the light to be slightly ever-changing in the way that natural light does, versus the consistency of most artificial light. Here the light source is at an angle, with the sunlight coming through a window perpendicular to where I'm sitting, with shadows being cast by the window frame and by my body. The use of light coming through a window or a doorway can add a frame within the frame. How might this change your composition? Consider also the color and light absorption of the materials on screen. Black fabric behaves very differently in light than white fabric. A textured brick wall behaves differently from a glossy white wall that bounces back a lot of light. Here I've closed a set of semi-sheer white curtains over the window. It's clearly darker, but also the light is more evenly distributed because it's being diffused through the fabric. Here I am directly facing the light source, the window, with those curtains closed and then opened. I'd of course want to use different exposure settings, but you can see some differences from changing the direction of the light source and the diffusion from the curtains. Okay, let's talk about artificial lighting. Often, when we go to record video at home with whatever lights are on, it ends up looking like this. If we use a very middle-of-the-road white balance setting with one of the most common types of household light bulbs, we will probably get something that looks very orange. Here, I only have one light on, coming from somewhat of an angle, and so there is also a really big shadow being cast. Now I've turned on a second light to fill things in, also at an angle, but from the other side. So now at least you can see my face pretty well. Because I only have these two lights, near the front pointed at me, and nothing filling in behind me or from all the way on one side, and I'm very close to the wall, you can still see some dramatic shadows. Professional lighting kits often come with some kind of plastic diffuser panel, and studio lights sometimes have what's called a softbox. Diffusing the light reduces the shadows and the harshness of the light. It's a bit like sunlight passing through white curtains, or through a layer of clouds on an overcast day. At home, you can sometimes point the light at a white wall or ceiling nearby and bounce the light onto your scene, instead of pointing it at your subject directly, getting more diffuse light that way. I don't have that option in this location, but I could use a reflector, more on that later. If your light is not diffused and you have bright lights pointed directly at your scene, you can end up with glare on any reflective surfaces. Here you can see it in my glasses and on the frame of this poster. If you have anything reflective in your shot, you want to keep an eye out for glare as you figure out exactly where to place your lights. Here now I have put in some contact lenses, as well as some makeup to make my face a little less shiny. Note how the light and shadows on the two sides here look slightly different in color. I'm using two of the same lights with different color temperature light bulbs. One is a warm light bulb and one is a cool daylight style light bulb. I highly recommend having some daylight style light bulbs around at home. I find they work better for photos and video. Here you can see the difference between the color of the bulbs with the same camera settings. I'm just using a couple of clip lights that I had laying around. A clip light like this is often listed as a clamped work light with an aluminum reflector, and you can generally find them at any hardware store. A small one like this is less than $10. Notice how changing the angle of this one light drastically affects the way my face looks. think about how perceptions about age, gender, beauty, demeanor, or emotion might be influenced simply by the angle of light. I'm using a person as the example here, but think too about how lighting affects our perception of an object and its perceived importance or emotional implications. Here is a more expensive option for lighting at home for filming that is extremely popular at the moment. This is called a ring light, as it's essentially a ring-shaped LED light. One like this is around $80 because it's large and has full color options, but there are also tiny cheap ones you can get at the drugstore that clip onto your phone and just have a cool white light. Normally you would put your camera in the middle of the light, but here I want to show you a wider view. Ring lights are popular with beauty vloggers because they light your face evenly and tend toward an image that is maybe even a little overexposed. And this looks very smoothed out, almost mannequin-like, eliminating any dark shadows on the face. Compare this to the heavily shadowed lighting from earlier. Here too we have a cool white light and a warm white light. And with my white balance settings here, the warm light is extremely orange. More expensive lights sometimes have RGB LEDs, allowing you to change the color of your light. Some also have strobing settings. How do the different colors of light change the tone of a scene? How might strobing or changing lights affect our perception of an action? Fortunately, to adjust the color of your light, you don't necessarily need to impulse purchase an $80 RGB ring light while having a minor emotional crisis while stuck inside your home. Here we have lighting gels. The Media Center has gel kits with a few different colors available. Lighting gels are also pretty affordable, and if you take care of them, you can keep using them for a while. It's basically just a piece of tinted plastic you shine light through. Important safety note. LED lights generally do not get hot to the touch, even after having been on for a while, which is part of why people like to use them. Regular non-LED light bulbs get very hot. Lighting gels are made of heat-resistant plastic, but they can still melt if used improperly. So if you're putting anything on top of a hot light, be aware of its potential to be a fire hazard. Do not put a gel directly onto a hot light bulb, and never leave a gelled light on unattended, especially if you're using something that's not actually designed for lighting use. Some gels are white or clear and are for diffusing the light. Here you can see the light get a little softer. Some gels are for color correction. Here you can see the cool light becoming a little warmer. Some gels are for dramatic color. Note that if I'm using a red light, objects in the scene that are actually red will, somewhat counterintuitively, look less red. So if you're using fake blood under a red gelled light, you may want to use a liquid that is darker than red, or a different color of light, to get the desired effect. When considering color, consider not only the color of the light, the color of the costume, but also the color of the background. Here is that ring light's cool white setting against a brick wall, looking a little warmer than it did against the plain white wall. Light hits the wall and bounces back onto the subject, so your lighting will look different with a white wall versus a dark wall versus a colorful wall. Speaking of bouncing light, the Media Center also has a reflector you can check out, which has different parts that can be zipped on and off to make it silver for cool light, gold for warm light, or white for softer, more neutral light. They make reflectors specifically for lighting for photography and video, but you can also use other materials to get a similar effect. This is one of those sunshades designed for the dashboard of your car while it's parked in the sun so it doesn't get hot inside. By adjusting the angle, you can see the light being bounced to different positions. And here I'm using a small mirror to reflect the light. You could also try using a big sheet of white poster board, or even some cardboard covered in aluminum foil. Play around with anything white or reflective you have around the house. While looking around your room and thinking about light, consider any little additional light sources you may have lying around. That small mirror I was using to reflect light actually has its own little lights, which can be used for a unique and dramatic look. And here I have a little novelty light, a sort of faux neon LED light in the shape of a bird, which I had gotten to decorate for a party a while back. It actually looks pretty good on camera. You can also try moving a light around to create a flickering look, especially if you're wanting to evoke a flashing neon sign or cars passing by outside. And here I am in some fluorescent lighting. We've spoken previously about setting shutter speed for video and how there are some guidelines to follow. If you're shooting at 24 frames per second, it's recommended that you use a shutter speed of 50, or 1/50th of a second. If you're shooting at 30 frames per second, it's recommended that you use a shutter speed of 60, or 1/60th of a second. If you don't do that, something that can happen is your lighting getting weird on camera. This is especially obvious here with fluorescent lighting. You can see the moving stripes getting more visible with a different shutter speed, and then getting less intense as I adjust the shutter speed back to 60. Thank you for watching, and may you enjoy your adventures in light.